Hey, Claire, it's great to have you with us today for this interview. Thank you for being here.
Thank you. Thank you, Wafa.
So, why don't we start by introducing yourself?
Yes, happy to. I've spent my career building a journey in FinTech. I've had multiple marketing roles in banking, online payment, and most recently, asset management. I've always seen marketing fueling the boom and then the expansion of FinTech products and services to end investors, but also professional investors like institutions. And so today I lead the client segment and growth marketing team for the institutional client group at BlackRock. I started on the iShares side, marketing ETFs, exchange traded funds to institutional investors globally. And then 2 years ago, I decided to take on a new opportunity within BlackRock, and I extended my remit to also offer mutual funds to institutional investors. I like to refer to my career so far as a journey with multiple moments of truth, those moments where you have to make a decision based on where your passions are or where you like to be 10 years from now. And I say a journey because mine didn't really start seamlessly. After I graduated from grad school, Sciences Po in Paris, I had this idea that marketing luxurious products for world-known brands would be something really cool to do. So I interned for a year in one of the most prestigious luxury group, and I quickly realized that my expectations were really far from what reality was. And so from that moment, I knew what I didn't want it to do, and I started being more interested by B2B marketing in the technology field. And it's only when I had my first job working for a FinTech company in Paris, building a brand and developing a market for the very first online bank in France, that I knew I was in the right place at the right time. And so since then, I've tried to cultivate that, trying to have an impact, but also while learning and something new and something interesting. And so, for example, I joined BlackRock 5 years ago because I was really drawn by the mission of the company, which is to help more and more people experience financial well-being. And I truly believe that marketing and technology are the backbones of finance.
I really love how you said that your path was a journey, because a journey insinuates that, there's something to discover and we don't know what. And so you just live it every day and you experience things as you go. Now, tell me more about how did you find the courage to leave such a prestigious first stage in your career working in the luxury industry? And how was it like for you to take that leap?
I think it all comes down to a cultural fit between you and the company. I remember my friends and my family being wowed by my internship. And I also remember being not fulfilled and feeling accomplished. So on one end, I thought, well, it's my first professional experience out of college, so maybe that's just the way things are. Certainly deceptive, but maybe the workplace isn't that glamorous after all. But on the other end, I was seeing my friends loving their first job, really enjoying themselves at work. So I knew something wasn't quite right. It took me some time to realize that, again, I wasn't at the right place at the right time. But eventually, I started to develop more interest for digital marketing and especially at the time, mobile marketing. Mobile marketing was still a thing 15 years ago. Now, digital marketing is just marketing. And so after some research and being like open-minded to new opportunities, I transitioned out of fashion to FinTech.
That makes a lot of sense. We spoke last time and you also shared that in the luxury industry, there was something that was sort of a deal breaker for you because the people you worked with did little to nothing to integrate you amongst the team. And you felt like you wanted to be included in the team culture. And you reached a moment where you told yourself, if the people that I'm working with and spending 8 to 12 hours per day are not making an effort to involve me, then it's not worth it. And I remember specifically you saying that for you, it has to be enjoyable for a work to be worth it. Tell me more about that.
To some extent, the relationship between an employee and an employer is yeah, it's more than a partnership. I think it's like marriage, right? Like each one of you have to commit. You have to commit into that relationship. So obviously, as a new employee, you all about trying to find ways to fit in, to lean in, right? But at some point, if the company is not committing itself to the relationship and trying to also find those bridges, find those opportunities to integrate you into the culture, I think it's just a message that both the company and you are not a good fit.
How did you come up to the conclusion that your value of enjoyment at work was much more important than having a shiny career in a very shiny and glamorous industry, which is the luxury industry?
Yeah, no, you're right. But think about it. You're spending 8 to 10 hours per day at work. I was spending more time with my colleagues than with my boyfriend at the time, who's now my husband. So think about it. You have to really enjoy yourself. It's hard to gain perspective, right, when you're in the middle of it. So you have to have friends and family that helps you in that journey. I'm a go-getter in the way that if something doesn't work, there's another solution. It usually doesn't stop me from moving on. So while I was not happy in that environment, I started to develop, interest for FinTech and web and digital. And so I kind of embraced that.
You have started your journey struggling to integrate yourself as a junior member into a team in the luxury industry. And going from there, you've managed to build a very rich career path. And you've worked in different countries and in different sub-industries, which is super interesting to hear about. Tell us about your top tips to integrate yourself as a new member into a new team.
I'm personally very adventurous in my life, but when it comes to my professional career, I had the tendency to be more risk adverse at first. It's not the case anymore, but at first I had to follow the guidance of my mentors. So for example, I worked in Singapore for a year consulting for an online payment company who wanted to expand its business in Southeast Asia and India. And looking back now, it was a phenomenal experience. I had never stepped a foot in Asia or in India before, moving my entire life to Singapore and working in a very different environment to what I was used to. So I think my first advice would be to seek for professional opportunities, experiences to become comfortable with the uncomfortable. Then in my field, specifically in marketing, one of the biggest strength of a successful marketer, I think, is empathy. With empathy, you can dialogue, you can encourage progress, you always seek for the best outcome. Empathy for clients will take, an average marketer doing a fine job to a marketer doing an amazing job. Now, empathy for colleagues will surely help you integrate into a new team easier. So I remember when I moved to the United States and I started working for a very corporate American company, I couldn't find my markers. It required me to be nimble at first, and eventually I got my bearings and made it work. And then I think my last advice for someone entering the workplace is that it's okay to make mistakes and to fail. Now, obviously, first you need to find the company who also has that philosophy, but I feel like now companies, at least tech companies, are more comfortable with the notion of failing. You can't possibly know everything out of college. I actually think you don't know much about the workplace after you graduate from school, and know that companies are not hiring you for your deep knowledge of the industry. The companies are really hiring you for your potential, your capacity to adapt, but also to challenge the status quo at the same time. So don't be afraid to have an opinion about something, to voice it, and don't be afraid to say that you don't know about it all, but you're here to learn quickly.
Fantastic. Yeah, these are great insights for sure. And I really, on top of that, I wonder if there are other advice, to implement when it comes to working in a team that has a different culture, because obviously you worked in Asia, you worked in Europe, now you're working in North America. Are there different steps or different things that we should know about when it comes to integrating ourselves in a new team that has a different culture?
Find commonalities. What are those common things that you have with your colleagues, with the company, with the culture? What is it that is common? What is it that is new for you and that you bring it in? And you should feel comfortable with the right fit within your team, within the company. You should feel comfortable bringing your whole self to work.
Staying with this theme of integrating ourselves into a new team, a lot of my clients who work in corporate often express their interest into transitioning to a more tech company or startup. You've obviously done that transition, that jump. Tell us about what there is to know for someone who works in a big corporate company that's more of in a traditional industry. What should they know before the transition into more of a tech industry, tech startup ecosystem? Is there a mindset? Is there a way that we should work? What's there to know?
Yeah, I think you're right. I think it's about having the right mindset. Totally. And there's like a tech company and a tech company. Not all of them are equal, obviously. So it is about having that mindset for sure. It is about being a bit entrepreneur yourself, right? Like being in like innovative, like seeking always more and challenging situation for you to grow. Well, now it doesn't mean that this does not exist in the corporate world. It does, but it's less frequent. I think when you go into tech companies, it's kind of like, across all tech companies, it's a standard. Something else as well is that switching from the corporate world to the tech or even like the startup environment is that you must be willing to not reinvent yourself, but you must be willing to adapt again and question sometimes what the way you've been working so far, the operation aspect of it, for example. So I think there's a little bit of it's not definitely not an introspection, but I think you have to be willing to question the way you've been working so far and be comfortable with changing some of your practice at work, some of your perspective on things, being even more open-minded. So making that transition, I think, required for someone to really be comfortable being a bit challenged, like mentally, for sure.
Now, Claire, my next question for you is how to deal with imposter syndrome, because yes, we may go into the tech field with an open mind and an eagerness to learn and be humble. However, we're all humans, right? No matter how much we prep for interviews or we prep to enter a new role, we're bound to experience a little bit of imposter syndrome here and there. So tell us about your top tips to face that and to manage that along the way.
Yeah, I think it's a great segue to what I was just talking about. I know the imposter syndrome very well. I worked for 4 different companies in 3 different countries and 2 different sub-industries in the last 15 years. So the imposter syndrome is a real thing when you're changing jobs and of course, when you're changing career. Now I'm not joining it anymore. And I came around this feeling actually with my current job. 5 years ago, joining the asset management world appeared to me as like climbing the Everest. How could I possibly understand one day what the chief investment officer at BlackRock was telling us at this annual town hall on inflation and the impact on the bond yield curve? And I remember sitting there in the room and feeling like I knew absolutely nothing. But to my point earlier, BlackRock didn't hire me for my deep knowledge of the industry. They hired me, a marketer, to bring brand awareness and create commercial opportunities with institutional investors. And I had to remind myself to separate my feelings from the facts and stick with my accomplishments and rely really on what I know how to do best. So to be more tangible, I think that finding a mentor in your company or in your field that can give you practical advice and support is really necessary. And then if you don't know the answer, bring perspective to the conversation, approach the problem that you're facing from a different angle than what your colleagues are used to. And then finally, I think also like small wins are big wins, right? Don't be a perfectionist. Adopt earlier on the 80-20 rule to find these small opportunities that are the most productive and rewarding and make them the priority.
For those of you who don't know, the 80-20 rule, it's the Pareto rule, and it states that it's, in order to get the best results, we should strive to spend 20% of our time to get 80% of the results, which just means that working smarter is better than working harder. That's what Claire insightfully shared with us right now. Given you are a very successful VP of marketing at a huge investment fund like BlackRock, and also given the fact that you've successfully joined different teams throughout your whole career path in different companies, in different industries, sub-industries, and countries, it is safe to say that you're an expert in marketing. Now, tell us, what are your top insights for someone who's looking to get into a new team and get a new job to market themselves in a way that gets them a higher salary?
I think what's important to have in mind is that when you're negotiating your salary or you're giving your expected like compensation if you're being hired by a company, is that it's not only about the amount that you're asking for at the moment. That amount sets a precedent for all your future compensation in your career. So obviously, the higher you anchor, the higher will be your future compensation for the rest of your career. And I think often we forget to put ourselves into the company or the recruiter's shoes. Recruiting new talent and retaining existing talent is certainly costly for a company. Once a company finds the right person, it can't afford to lose that person. So from the standpoint of the company, they'll pay the price to not let you go. To find what that price is, I recommend you tease out what it is that the company value, what it is in the role that makes it unique and has value to the eyes of the recruiter. Is it hard skills gained by a specialized degree in a niche sector? And then if you have those skills, then you have that competitive advantage that you can leverage in the salary negotiation process. So I think it's all about finding what's valuable for the role for the company. And it's during the interview process by asking the right questions to the recruiter that you can find out what's valuable and take that information with you when it's time to talk about money.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I adore that advice. It is not about negotiating the salary itself, but there's a lot of marketing work beforehand to market yourself in a way that shows that you're irreplaceable, that you're indispensable. And that's why the interview prep and all of the marketing materials we produce, when we apply for a job, and that as a career coach, I help my clients prepare, is extremely, extremely important, because it does set the tone for the salary conversation. You obviously have started in one industry that's completely different from the one that you're working right now, and in between you've hopped in many places along the way. So I mean, obviously the base for your salary could or could not mean the same thing depending on who you were talking to. When it's time to talk numbers, though, what are the top tips that you have to share for someone to be able to properly negotiate their salary?
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. I think it's all about combining a lot of different information about, taking into account your level of seniority, your the country, the industry, the competitive market at that specific moment, right? Are we out of a crisis, for example, in the job market? Are we more in a prosper phase? I think there's a lot of information that you need to take into account. You just have to do your due diligence. Like, I'll be honest with you, it is about like making sure you do some Google search, right? And you tease out information about how is the company that you would like to join is willing to pay talent. Some are not, and you have to know that information ahead of time, right? Some are the biggest, tech companies will pay the price. They are willing to pay for extremely talented people. And so when it comes to be talking about numbers, if you think your value is X, I would challenge you to add a bit more to that amount. And the reason why is because you don't want to come across to the company, to the employer, as like underselling you. Obviously, you don't want to be shooting for the stars. That would not make sense at all. You need to find that right price. But if you're thinking X, you're probably valued a little bit more than X.
Absolutely. You're not begging for a salary. You're there because you have something to offer. You have a lot of things, in fact, to offer. So, you're at that interview to explain to, that firm and that interviewer that you have so many skills and competencies to offer. You have so much to offer, and that doesn't come for free. And therefore, when it comes time to talk numbers, that number is simply a reflection of everything else that you've shared about yourself. And when it comes down time to negotiate, that's when it's really interesting to highlight again, yeah, but my value is this, and I bring this to the table. And by the way, this is something that I've achieved. So it's not about, an auction where you just say a number and they say count a number and it's awkward. There's behind those numbers, there's a meaning, there's value, and that value that you bring.
Absolutely. And I think, when we're out of college, we have, and I say that as a general statement, we have the tendency to under-evaluate ourselves, right? Again, you're not selling your deep knowledge of the industry when you're out of college, but you are selling how smart and bright you are as a person. What's your potential down the line, like 2, 5, 10 years from now? The company is willing to invest in you so you can keep growing with the company. And I think those are things to take into consideration.
That is so important. Thank you for sharing that. Absolutely. For all of you who are in college or right off college, or even more established active professionals, but are still a bit reticent to negotiate their salary and a bit unsure about their value and how to negotiate it, keep in mind that, when it comes time to negotiate your salary, think about everything that you've accomplished. If you're in college, think about all of those sacrifices you made to go through that college education. You've probably had some debt and you've spent countless hours prepping for those exams, prepping for that interview. You've probably moved cities, and that has a cost. That has an emotional and physical, but also monetary costs. Factor that in when it comes time to discuss numbers. Remember, what are all those expenses that you've paid up front before you got into that interviewer. And it holds true if you are a already established professional. Think about all of those expenses and all of those sacrifices that you made that have a cost, because, you know, you need to factor them in, because, you know, like Claire, when she got into BlackRock, she could have lowered the ball and undersold herself. But if she had done that, she would not have taken into account all of that time and energy and effort, and also financial sacrifices she may or may not have made to learn about liquidity or risk, or all those notions that were mentioned in those town halls that she went to. And she mentioned, you know, like getting into BlackRock and getting into that industry seemed like Mount Everest. You know, climbing Mount Everest will require a lot of preparation in the future from the moment when you do get that offer. Okay. And that employer says, okay, you're hired. You're not just set and you're not just cruising. You will need a lot of resources, monetary or not, to get you going and to climb that Everest so that you can establish yourself in that position. So think about all of that and the cost of that. And that, in my opinion, can significantly help you lower your anxiety around money talk. You're obviously much more than a very accomplished professional. You're also a mother and a spouse, as well as a woman. And I'm sure you have many more other identities and talents. Tell me more about, what do you do to manage your work-life balance and to find a balance that works for you? Because for everyone who watches me or who knows me, I don't believe that balance is just this one size fits all concept. It's more of something that needs to be tailored depending on the individual and the person. So tell me more about what you do to find your own balance.
Finding a work-life balance is really critical to my sanity and my well-being. I'm finding balance in the long term, right? So some days are tough and they're jammed with work responsibilities, but sometimes a work day can be lighter. So I take it as an opportunity to stock on family quality time. So basically, I'm constantly finding a balance over the period of a week. Again, not something that I experienced right after college. It took several years to learn and put in practice, but eventually you get there.
And I think it's also important to remember that the notion of balance is not this ideal, perfect goal to reach. We don't need to have a perfect balance, even the one that works for us every single day. Some days will be tough and what we've expected will not come true. And as you said, like one kid will be sick or we will be sick, and all the plans we've made for that day will go down the drain. And therefore, the notion of balance is more like fulfillment. It's something that flows. So it's something that you cannot catch like this. It's not that much of a tangible concept. Therefore, it's something to look at in the medium and long term. So at the end of the week, do you feel balanced? Or at the end of the month, check in with yourself and understand, are you fulfilled? Are you balanced? Do you feel like you have enough interactions with your loved ones, your friends? Are you having enough leisure? Are you sleeping enough? Are you intellectually challenged as well at work? That's how you check in with your balance.
It's all about finding your own balance. And I think you're right, Wafa. Like I truly believe that there's no one size fits all. It's about what matters to you. It's about how you make it work. And don't try to copy or don't even think that how your colleagues or your friends are finding that balance that could work for you. It could, but it's absolutely not certain that model that they're applying would actually work for you and your family.
All right, last question for you, Claire, today. What do you think about the value of coaching and what comes to mind when you hear that word?
You know, coaching wasn't a thing when I got out of college like 15 years ago. It's a profession that appeared and it is rising and growing, and there's a reason for that right now. So I truly believe that we used to have mentors and friends to help us in challenging situations. Today, professional coaches like you can help someone to really make progress quickly. Some people don't necessarily have a community to help them at a specific moment of time. So seek for professional advice. I think it's absolutely the right thing to do. And I definitely encourage that.
What's a last word you want to share with our audience today on how they can grow their career?
Have fun. Having a career is a journey. It takes several years. It will take you from one part of the world to another part. It will help you grow personally on top of your profession, obviously.
Thanks, Claire. I'm all about having fun at work. Now tell me, where can our viewers find you online?
Find me on LinkedIn, connect with me, and I'll be more than happy to spend some time with you, and we can talk about anything that we covered today in the video.
I will put your LinkedIn information in the description box below. Thank you so much, Claire, for your time today.
Thank you so much, Wafa. Have a good day.